So thank you all for coming. We are glad to have you here, and hopefully this won't be the last time that you're here. So starting with you, Elliott, please introduce.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elliott Ferguson. I am the president and CEO of Destination DC, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau here in Washington. Convention and Visitor Bureaus, how many of you have heard of CVB before? Of course, you guys should have, so good. Most of the folks in the room. Convention and Visitor Bureaus are in place to help market a destination, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more. And I represent the Convention and Visitors Bureau for Washington and the greater Washington area.
My name is Gary Oster. Good evening. I'm with the U.S. Travel Association here in Washington, D.C. And we're a trade association that's an umbrella organization for all the travel industry. And there are 19 vertical segments within travel: hotel, rent-a-car, cruise, etc. And our job is to increase travel into the U.S. as well as within the U.S. We work to remove a lot of the travel barriers that exist within our country.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Rob Wilder, co-founder and CEO of ThinkFoodGroup. You probably know us by my more boisterous partner, Jose Andres, the Jose Andres Restaurants. Jose and I came together 22 years ago to open Jaleo at 7th and E, and now have 7 restaurants in DC, 3 in development here, and we also have 10 restaurants around the country, Los Angeles, Miami, and elsewhere. But still our creative headquarters is very much here in DC in the Penn Quarter, and this is the home we're committed to for the future. And I think after tonight, after Gray's introduction, I'm ready to enroll and come get my master's degree. So very exciting stuff.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Lockwood. I'm the general manager of the Renaissance Washington, D.C. Downtown Hotel, just a block and a half from here. I've been with Marriott for almost 31 years. I like to say I started when I was in kindergarten. Don't say anything, Elliott. But a lot of my career came through operations and spent some time in human resources as well, so I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So I want to ask the question, because I've done a lot of graphics on it. Why do you feel that DC is such a major hospitality city and really a burgeoning food city in some respects? Why do you think the world's largest hotel management corporations, asset management groups have located here? Why are so many hot restaurants coming out of DC? What are the incentives? What's causing them to stay? Curious.
Well, I think a lot of it started over 85 years ago when Marriott opened a 9-seat root beer stand down on 13th Street. And then the Marriotts moved here, the family moved here, and they built our corporate headquarters in Bethesda. And I know that there's a lot of great incentives for them. At one point they were looking at not only to leave, they weren't going to leave Maryland, but they were going to leave Montgomery County, and there was a lot more incentives added to that. So from there you have Choice Hotels, which is Steve Joyce, which is a former executive with Marriott. And I think that the continuation continues. Host used to be a part of Marriott. And when we split in 1989, 1990, Host Marriott was actually their offices were in the building of Marriott corporate headquarters. And then they moved out when Chris Nassetta joined Host. They moved across the street, so they remained in Montgomery County. And then Chris Nassetta now runs Hilton Hotels worldwide. I know he went out to Los Angeles for a while, but I think what they brought back was the talent that is in this market is incredible. Right. And plus, I think the fact that tourism, there is a lot of legislative challenges as it relates to tourism in total. And so having Capitol Hill right here and being able to be down there in a moment for whatever reason also helps out as well. But I think a lot of it is that the destination kind of grew from the Marriott corporate headquarters. But I think the reason they're staying, or the reason that they're coming in, is because of the talent that is out there, that's able to the brain talent that's out there that continues.
Yeah, I agree with what Sharon was saying. I think the least glamorous reason as to why DC is a destination is the government. And I say the least glamorous because globally, as we market our destination, folks in Washington think that everybody wants to come here. And yes, we do our fair share of good convention business, great convention business, excellent convention business, and tourism. But the global community looks at us as a city that they want to come for half a day while they spend 4 days in New York, and they want to see the White House, and they want to see the Capitol building, and the one Smithsonian, not the 16, and then they want to leave. So the reason why Mr. Marriott and his family moved from Utah to Washington, D.C. was because of the fact that the nation's capital was here and there was a lot of opportunity. And the reason why we have over 2,000 associations headquartered in our backyard and all the lobbying firms and all the other businesses that represent this city is because of Capitol Hill and the opportunities that exist. So this industry continued to mushroom because we were the nation's capital and because Congress exists here. And our job is to focus on all the other cool things in which we have to offer as a destination.
Absolutely. Well, along the same lines, I wanted to bring up one thing that Gary has been working on for some time now. And in our conversation, a few days ago, he mentioned that American culture and pride is having a somewhat unexpected impact on the industry as a whole. Namely, Americans who work too much and forego their paid time off. They're actually, he mentions that they're actually hurting the industry and the American economy overall. And so I wanted you to take a few minutes to describe how U.S. Travel Association's new program, Travel Effect, is starting to address these issues and what we can do as hoteliers and consumers to counter these effects.
That was a soft pitch. I'm going to get up on the soapbox now, right? So 42% of American workers don't use all their earned time off, their vacation time, PTO, et cetera. And in fact, they leave 3.2 days to expire. Can you imagine that? Anybody here get paid time off? Yeah? Anybody ever not use all their earned time off? Raise your hands. Come on, raise your hands. Congratulations, you just gave yourself a pay cut. Your boss paid you to take time off, and that could represent $500 to $5,000 by not taking that day, or 2, or 3. See, Americans are in this really crazy place. We went through a really tough recession, and people were fearful for losing their jobs. But we also, as a country, have an American work ethic that is just highly focused on being productive and earning and moving ahead. Well, the problem is it's stressing us out. We're overworked. We're having a high divorce rates. Our kids don't know us. And we're so overworked that we're stressed to the point where we're not as productive as we should be. So what we think we're doing that makes sense by staying in work and not using all of our time off is we're actually doing the opposite in negative benefit to us as an individual, number one. Number two, because of that, we're not as productive as a workforce as we could be. And we have all these negative issues that surround us. So we're working on a premise that you need to take your earned time off, and we call it the day off deficit. That there's this day off deficit that we've got to change in the core of how American thinks. So it's a behavioral change. It's a behavioral change that's going to take many, many years. And so just think of this. If you took one more day off, if the 42% of Americans who left their 3.2 days unused took one more day off, that would generate, just for the travel industry, $30 billion in additional sales. One day. But let's say those 42% used all their days off. We could employ an additional 1.2 million Americans in the industry and retail and manufacturing and many other services industry, putting America back to work just by doing things like recharging our batteries, reuniting ourselves with family and friends, and being more productive. So this is a big initiative. It's a big idea. It's going to take a lot of voices. It means we have to start a national conversation. That means all of you who raised your hand because you didn't take all your earned time off, and you probably bragged to somebody at a cocktail party or over a beer saying, yeah, I lost X number of days. You need to make that your scarlet letter. That is not a badge of honor. You should be embarrassed. Your family should hold you accountable for that. I'm guilting you right now, okay? So a year from now, no matter where you are, you should be thinking about today. You should be thinking about today. And when you reflect on 2014, did you use all your earned time off? You're going to be seeing a lot of this. It's going to come from messaging from organizations like Elliott's, from a destination marketing organization. You're going to see restaurateurs saying, you need to take some time for yourself. You need to come and visit us. And you're definitely going to see restaurant message or hotel lodging messaging going on the same theme because it makes so much sense. So that's my soapbox, and I'm going to get off.
Do it for your country.
Do it for yourself, do it for your country. There you go. I love that, Rob.
But I'm curious, then how do you foresee this next generation of travelers, like the millennials that we're talking about, affecting this pattern? And how do we support it? I mean, we take the time off, but do you see the millennials really kind of championing this?
So if I can, and I'll let my fellow colleagues here talk. Millennials are a whole lot smarter than people like me. My kids watched how hard I worked as a hotel guy. And in fact, the joke, my wife would take my paycheck and she goes, "Oh, look at that, 80 hours. They only paid you for 1 week." Because in those days, that's what you worked, 80 hours a week. It may be, I'm sure it's a bit different because the world has changed a bit. But millennials are saying, you missed it. You know, I don't want to be like my dad working so hard. That's what my kids say. And they want to experience life. They want the memories. And I was fortunate because I was in the hotel business for so many years. They had the experiences. Now they want to manufacture those experiences for themselves and for their families. And so I think they're holding themselves more accountable to actually do those experiences and not be so aggressive in the ladder climb, but to be thinking more about the balance and well-being. And that's a lot of what the essence of Travel Effect's about.
Very good.
Yeah, and I think also, the essence of, we would work 80 hours, but you go home and there was nothing left. There was no email, no voicemail, no cell phone, so you could really uncharge even though you were working those hours. So as much as there really wasn't a balance, it kind of balances. Where our millennials today are very comfortable working and then having private time or, going and having their time off and doing something for work, and it just blurs the lines. And I think as hoteliers, as the industry, we've got to be prepared for that. So if you look at our hotels, you look at the way we've set up our lobbies. Our old lobbies, I used to call them, they were like grandma's living room, minus the plastic on the sofas. But our lobbies were pass-throughs. They were not there to engage. They were not there to connect. And so in the future, as we look at it, millennials are a lot smarter, and they also demand that time to reconnect. And I think, so when you look at communities like City Center, DC, it is there for the next generation. It really is. And I remember this area, I know Gary does definitely, is that you couldn't walk outside in daylight back in the late 80s, early 90s when the hotels were opening in this area. But the vibrancy, and I think what's coming to DC, which is really exciting, is it's not just the monuments anymore.
Right.
People are coming and wanting to visit our nation's capital for everything else, for the nightlife, for the restaurants, for the retail that's coming in, and it continues to go, and that's all focused on what the millennials want in the future. And I think when we look at like Marriott Rewards or some of these reward programs that are out there, we're also looking to the future. As a matter of fact, I heard our chief marketing officer last week, and for us, we'll squirrel away. We'll squirrel away all those points until we get that week-long family vacation. Millennials don't want to do that. They want instant gratification, right? And they want instant gratification out there. So we're looking even at Marriott Rewards and some of those other programs out there and how we can change the landscape of what the rewarding system looks like for the loyalty of customers in the future. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, it is. And I think the beauty of what U.S. Travel has done is that this message starts in the White House. So Roger Dow and other stakeholders within our industry have spent a lot of time helping to I won't use the word reprogram, but getting to that's the word, shape the messaging in terms of the importance of this industry. And you guys remember when President Obama took office, and then in 2010, that was that whole little thing with the pictures in Vegas, and all of a sudden, don't go to Vegas, it's the wrong. I think the messaging there tends to focus on the fact that how many people you're unemploying by making that statement, not go to Vegas, because what's in Vegas other than tourism and hospitality. And then now the message as it pertains to taking vacation days and the importance of taking vacation days. If you guys live in this area, you see the Ocean City commercials first thing in the morning, you see that that's their messaging. It's like, if you're sitting at home and you're in this area, come to Ocean City, don't squirrel away your vacation days. And from our perspective, as we market our destination, we focus a lot of our energies on the international market because, right now we're going to Australia in a month or so. They take 25 days a year. and they take it, and they dare you to call, and they unplug. And in our industry, or in our society, you know, it takes you about a week to finally step away from the phone, and then you got to get back to work. Or the perception is, oh, you're taking a day off, it must be nice, and then you're guilted. So we're really having to work with that mentality, and it benefits us all. And the most important thing is that you come back with people that are refreshed and you get better ideas. So, and that's the beauty of this industry and the program that you guys are doing here at Georgetown.
Perhaps younger people consider a night out at a great restaurant like a vacation, and for that I apologize. But,
No.
No, not at all. No, that's called the refresh part.
Here's a quick refresh. But I think younger people more and more when they travel want to have this sort of transportive experience where they don't just visit somewhere as a tourist. They sort of move in for a day or two or three, and they want to live like a local. They want to go to the local hot spots to eat and drink, and the coffee shops, and they sort of want to try on for size living in Washington or wherever they travel. And this city's gotten a lot better at meeting those needs in addition to great museums and culture.
And even our hotel rooms. I mean, if you look back, I mean, even 15 years ago, you know, I can only speak to Marriott, but we had one room product, and we put it could be in Pittsburgh, it could be in Philadelphia, it could be in Peoria, you wouldn't know. And if you were a traveler and you closed your eyes and you opened it, you couldn't remember what city you were in, because every room looked alike. Now there was obviously some buying power that went along with that, but then there also was that, you know, that's kind of where the boomers wanted to be. They wanted to be comfortable. A Marriott burger, you know, in one city is exactly like a Marriott burger in another city. And it was the sea of sameness out there. And now we're recognizing the fact that our hotel rooms really need to be reflective of the city in which they inhabit. Yeah. And so it's not just, you know, for our
That's
organization.
especially true for your brand.
Yeah, especially for Renaissance. It's
yeah.
all about being indigenous and being very local and even micro in the locality of where you are. And I think to see that, you know, moving down the road, things that are coming up are, you know, smartphone check-in. You know, over 400 of our hotels right now have mobile app check-in. And so eventually it's going to be, you're going to have a smartphone and you may not even have to go to the desk if you don't want to. We have 4 prototypes out there right now where guests can order. There's an app where guests can make any request and it goes directly to the hotel. In our meeting rooms, we have applications. So if a meeting planner's out there, instead of picking up the phone and trying to call somebody and leaving a message or whatever, there's an app for that. Our whole meetings packaging is looking different. Using Pinterest to be able to put pictures out there and how we sell our meeting space. So technology plays a huge part. The Marquee is opening with a whole new television concept, and I believe, I'm probably speaking out of turn, but I believe that Netflix is even available through the television. So it's really about where we're heading from a technology, where we're heading from the way in which our rooms are configured, and how we're redesigning the way in which we, as a hotel organization, want to look like in the future. It's exciting times.
One thing I'd like to or question you all about is along those same lines. We're talking about an indigenous experience, especially the one that Renaissance promises its consumers. Let's bring it back to DC specifically. I would argue that DC is generally perceived, and Elliott, you can disagree with me if you like, as a tourist city. But honestly, you know, millennials and new audiences are expecting more authentic experiences. So how are we creating the perception of DC as a more authentic experience? How are we delivering that in terms of restaurants and hotels and the way we're marketing DC to all visitors?
Sure. I'll start. You know, we're the organization responsible for the branding and marketing of the city. Hopefully, if you haven't, or if you heard of our DC Cool campaign, which is in point by design to get people to think differently about our destination. There's usually one general reaction when people come to Washington, you know, domestically or internationally. It's like we never knew how cool DC was. So we kind of borrowed the campaign from the America Cool exhibit, which is taking place at the National Portrait Gallery, which I encourage you all to see. But it really takes, it takes all the facets of our city that we all appreciate the most. Nightlife, sporting events, outdoor activities, food scene, cultural activities, and all those other variables, of course, infrastructure, and it ties it into the messaging that we're more than monuments, memorials, and museums. Now, we all know that, you know, my team has heard me say all the time about the traditional trip. First trip to Washington is when you're in the 8th grade. And when you come and you're in the 8th grade, and the folks in the Wilson building, which is our city hall, oh yeah, the city's doing great. We see all these kids in the city. You know, we're an economic development organization, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And so I see these kids, and I think about when I was in the 8th grade, I'm like, well, my mom gave me enough money to go get a hot dog, and then we left the city and stayed at a hotel outside of Washington for a variety of reasons. So that's what's happening, and it's great that they're here, but the economic impact is not quite the same. So we're looking at every visitor to the city and the economic impact associated with what they bring. So we spend a lot of time focusing on the domestic community because they have certain ideas as to what to see and do in Washington, but they still have no idea as to how cool we are as a destination. And we're spending more and more time with the international community because economically, they stay longer, they spend more, and they go shopping. The Brazilians, you know, we know that they're coming and they're wanting to do a lot of fun things in the city. Their destination of choice in the U.S. is Miami and New York City. You know, but in between is Washington, D.C., and we're showcasing all the wonderful things that there are to see and do in the city, especially restaurants and nightlife, because when people come here, they're always intrigued by how unique our destination is beyond their perception. I call it the BBC CNN effect. And no matter where you are in the world, you're watching something happening in Washington, and it's not glamorous. It's politics. It's
Power.
It's power, but it's not the power that, you know, it's not necessarily the things that make you want to say, I want to go there.
Right.
We're not Disney World, or we're not Miami Beach or New York City, but we have so many of those variables. You know, we have the second largest number of theater seats outside of New York. Everyone raises an eyebrow, especially Washingtonians, when we say that. But what that means to us is that no, we're not New York, but by coming to Washington, you'll be able to do all these free things, plus go see great theater, eat at great restaurants, catch a baseball game, maybe Lady Gaga at the Verizon Center this weekend, the Wizards on Friday, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what we're focusing on in terms of our promotions.
Hey, you should tell them what you're doing in 2017.
I will, yes.
There you go.
Well, we're hosting, speaking of
events.
Garrett, yeah, the largest international opportunity that we have for the leisure market to expose them to a destination is a convention that U.S. Travel puts on that used to be called Powwow, but it's now called IPW. So if you've been in the industry, you may have known it as Powwow. It's 40 years old, never been in Washington, D.C., even though U.S. Travel is headquartered here. And by design, by 2017, we'll have so many different assets online. Of course, the Marriott Marquis opened, the Cambria Suites Hotel just opened down the street here. The Southwest Waterfront will be done. City Center will have all that great shopping and theater and nightlife and restaurants and all these other variables. And the economic impact, which is one of the things we share with our city leaders, is significant in terms of what happens from an international perspective after you host IPW. So you're going to hear a lot about it as you enter this program and you enter the industry, because hopefully by then a lot of you will be working with us as we prepare to host IPW. Did I do a good job?
You did a great job.
And I would just say, I would just like to piggyback and accolades to Elliott and his team, because there is a lot of concessions from a hotel community in order to bring this program in.
Yes.
The benefits are endless, but sometimes as hoteliers, we still see heads in beds and occupancy and ADR, and we sometimes forget the bigger picture.
Restaurants,
So,
butts and seats.
uh-huh.
Heads and beds, butts
Butts
and
and
seats.
seats.
Yours
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
nice.
actually,
Sounds
so
nice,
to give you a kind of a sense of the scale, the economic impact is so enormous that this one 3-day convention, it's a marketplace where the international buyers of international travel come to the host city, come to Washington. Last year, 3 days, $4.7 billion, that's a B, dollars worth of business was transacted on the show floor. 90,000 appointments take place between buyers and sellers. You go, wow, that sounds pretty big. Well, that generates 8.8 million visitors out of that 3 days worth of marketplace. And for the host city, they book $424 million worth of business on site 3 days. That's monstrous. And that's over a 3-year time period. But that's a lot of economic engine work coming into a city to fill restaurants, hotels, and visit all the attractions. It also is an economic engine that added 5,260 jobs because of the new business that was booked. So when you have these concessions that take place, and the hoteliers are very, very sensitive to things they have to do during a host city event, the ROI is just, it's dramatic. And it takes a lot of work from the leadership of Elliott to convince the city the political leadership of the city, from the business leadership of the city, and because this is a federal city, there's all those other federal nuances that take place. But once IPW comes here, it really will help accelerate and generate so much more international traffic coming into this city. It'll just be amazing.
Absolutely.
I think the city still struggles, though, with an identity from a convention perspective. We have a beautiful convention center. We've got a brand new hotel that opens up now, anchors that convention center. And we still struggle sometimes as a community to bringing that business in, because they still see DC as just going to visit, Capitol Hill. So I think that's something that we're working as a community at large, because it's shown. I mean, American College of Cardiology was just here in March, correct?
Yep.
What's the number of hotels that they used to fill that convention?
12,000?
It was 12,000 rooms. So how many hotels did they use? 80 hotels.
Yeah.
So what we struggle with as a community is, if you had 12,000 in Vegas or you had 12,000 in Atlanta, how many hotels would you fill?
Vegas, two to three hotels.
2 to 3 hotels in Vegas, okay.
Yeah.
And in
Atlanta,
Atlanta,
6.
probably 6 or 7. So logistically, as a community, we need to, and I'm speaking on behalf of the hotels, we need to be more bold in taking larger group blocks and getting these customers in. American Heart Association is a perfect example. They're not going to come back until we can figure it out.
Right.
So that's where the collaboration comes in, and I really think the excitement comes in. But I know that Elliott's team works extremely hard, as well as the hotel communities, and we just need to continue to do a better job. So I definitely think that could be something that the university could help with, us putting a strategy in place on how we can get everybody to think a little differently about the type of business. We should be doing 20, 25 conventions a year. This year we'll do 12, 13 big ones. Right. And then some of the smaller ones. But it's really, that's the kind of success that will layer the additional business, bring the additional foot traffic in. It's important for us to not only just look at leisure, but convention as well. And how do we marry that all together to be that dynamic city? Because it's a lot easier to prove to 5,000 people that we're a really cool city and city centers are a real cool destination than to bring one person in at a time to prove it to them. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'd like to make a pitch for culinary branding as well.
Yes.
You see entire nations, Peru, Mexico, having huge success pitching their destination just based on its food traditions and culinary attractions. I think I read a statistic that there's 75 million Americans that now make vacation travel decisions based on food and dining.
Well, the number 1 and number 2 reason are activities of travel, food, or dining, and shopping.
Shopping, right.
And depending on what culture,
About the activities.
they reverse one or two. So it's always number 1 or 2 activities.
My kind of vacation.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'm there.
So we've got a solution to your problem.
Well, along those same lines, though, can you maybe speak to the notion of DC as a food city? I think many Americans are starting to recognize that there is a serious food scene here, but maybe not so much on the international level. So what have companies like you who are innovating new concepts for food, how are you addressing this?
This is the part where I get to go on the soapbox and take all the credit. But no, I think Jose's made a big impact on DC and kind of our brand and image, whether it's one of the first chefs from DC accepting the James Beard Award for the best chef in the nation, and thanking, even before he got to his team and his partner, the city of Washington, how it's embraced creativity and innovation, and what a fabulous dining destination it's become. But I think it does take kind of iconic brands. I mean, we have great historical brands like Ben's and Old Ebbitt, but it more and more revolves around personalities and chefs. Americans actually have this infatuation with chefs and probably trust chefs more than politicians and most public figures.
They're bipartisan.
For some reason. But for somebody like Jose, who's such a great spokesperson, and all the other up-and-coming and great chefs we have in DC, probably going back to Jean-Louis and some of the early innovators back in the 80s. But it's been an amazing 25-year period of just kind of burgeoning innovation and creativity. And I mean, we, after our success in Los Angeles and Miami, I guess we could have chosen to put our creative headquarters somewhere else. But it's here in the Penn Quarter with Minibar and our new creative office that's kind of the focal point for that. And I think if we succeed in our effort to get Minibar onto the list of top 10 restaurants in the world, forget about DC and the nation, we've just made a couple of those lists. That's the kind of thing that can change people's minds about the destination.
A large part of our marketing, we had a huge dinner with a lot of our customers a few months ago at the convention center, and they recognized all the James Beard Award winners in the city, and quite a few of them actually came in and cooked from around the country, came in to Washington to cook the meal. So in terms of food being a huge seller for us, we utilize that on a regular basis. We utilize food and the restaurant scene as a platform, working with the Restaurant Association. We had a huge event in New York with our media events, whereas we invite various media organizations to come in. We had chefs come up with us. We had mixologists, can't call them bartenders anymore, there with us, and the whole theme of it was Washington first, but of course the food scene, which resonates as a lot of the advertising we do is in food and wine, and a lot of the food related magazines and publications, because the quality of the visitors or the readers of those magazines are the ones in which we attract to Washington D.C. So to the point that you're making, and I know my team met with you earlier today in terms of all the things we're doing and how we can kind of continue to make food a primary scene. And it's interesting because when you think of a city like Vegas, and you know in your slide you reference gaming, which clearly was the #1 reason for since Vegas existed as to why people went to Vegas. Mm-hmm. But that's no longer the case. You know, now it's shopping, it's the food scene, it's theater.
Yeah, the mix of sales has definitely flipped.
It's flipped. So
to the hospitality side versus the gaming side.
And you hear more and more people say they go to Vegas because of the food scene, which is why so many dynamic chefs are investing in that city. And that's what we're also seeing here, because there's so many dynamic new chefs that are in Washington. We utilize Carla Hall, who has a show in New York but lives here in DC for a lot of our events. And you know, I was watching Jose Andres last weekend. He did the shoot in Puerto Rico, the food show he has. I believe it was on Headline News Television or one of the CNN channels, right, and it was 30 minutes of him spending time going through Puerto Rico and the time that he spent there. And clearly the first thing that I said to the marketing team is, when is he going to do that in Washington, D.C.? Because there is an ROI associated with restaurants in our city.
We did that with Anthony Bourdain in D.C., so
good,
and some others as well, including 60 Minutes that did a profile on Jose and all of our places here as well as around the world.
So speaking along those lines, I'm curious, you know, it's often said that Washington, D.C. immerses international visitors into American culture, and it also does the same in some ways for domestic visitors. I'm curious about this and how we achieve that, and how the brand of America has either stayed the same or diversified itself in the last few years. And also, I would argue, looking at some of ThinkFoodGroup's efforts, for example, we're immersing American visitors into international culture as well, because DC is obviously a very international city. So can you guys speak to that a little bit?
Well, it's certainly our country's well-deserved reputation to be a melting pot. DC is the virtue of being extremely diverse, and all kinds of nationalities and shapes and sizes represented here. And I think particularly in the restaurant community, both our workforce is incredibly international. I'm not sure, I should have checked how many nations, national backgrounds we have on our team, but I'm sure it's in the dozens. So between our guests in the restaurant and the teams working in the restaurants, it's a very vibrant international scene that I think people love. And the kind of authentic experiences we try to create, whether it's transporting you to Spain or a Mediterranean island or Oaxaca, Mexico, plays beautifully on that, on Washington, just as a true great international city, and capitalizing on its diversity.
Yeah, I think from the hotel community, we challenge ourselves to understand the cultures around the world. And it's very easy for us because in my hotel we have over 35 different countries and over 18 different languages spoke within the ambassadors that work for us. So it's easy for us to understand, but it's also helping to understand, they're helping to understand others how different, when different nationalities come in, how do we address, particular individuals? But they also they like the indigenous. They love to know what's in the area. And I think for us, shopping, the additional shopping that's being added from a city center perspective is really helping us, because the international travelers come in and they usually bring one suitcase that's empty. And, we have some great shopping, but not unforgettable shopping. So I think with City Center coming in, we do a lot of diversity training, understanding each other, and it's not just nationalities anymore. It's we use the iceberg approach. So what you see and understand, and then everything underneath of it, and really understanding the true diversity of each other. So we're working better as an organization, so that we're focused solely on the guests that are coming in. So we recognize international as a flavor, and as an opportunity. We want to make sure that they're utilizing that, but also picking on the Renaissance brand as well.
Right now in Washington, Passport DC is a huge event that's taking place the next few weekends, whereas many of the embassies are opening their doors and welcoming guests for free, which is one of the huge selling points in Washington, that there's so many things you can do here that are free. And you just imagine when the EU embassies open their doors and you're going to those various embassies, which you all know that when you're in an embassy, you're in that country and you're experiencing the food and the cuisine and all the other, and the dress of those particular countries. That's something that's very unique to Washington. We have 185 embassies, so we're probably one of the most international cities arguably in the U.S., especially with only 650,000 people that live here, and we capitalize on that on a regular basis. The flip side of that is, as we are out trying to market DC as a destination and everyone else is doing the same thing, there are some advocacy issues in which we've got to focus on, and it started with a lot of the work from U.S. Travel and President Obama basically focusing on the fact that we need to make it easier for people to get here. So when we talk about China, and you go there, hey, come to U.S. or come to Washington, D.C., and they're like, yeah, I'm going to wait in line for 8, 9 hours or 10 hours for a visa, and then 3 months later, maybe I'll be able to come to your country. It's not very inviting. And the same thing in Brazil and other countries, South Africa, that we've traveled to. And so a large part of that, as the president has basically said, by 2021, he wants 101 million visitors, international visitors in our country. There's a lot of things in which we've got to focus on, which kind of ties into the subject at hand in terms of all the career opportunities that tie into the hospitality industry, because we've got some infrastructure problems with our airports. If you've ever flown to any of the international airports, they're basically global world-class malls. And if you go to some of our airports, they're not.
Actually, the latest global air ratings came out. And of the 25 top airports in the world, the United States had that many.
0.
That's embarrassing.
Yep.
World power, great country, capitalist market, and we had 0.
Infrastructure in terms of transportation, you can't catch the train from the East Coast to the West Coast. If you're in China, you can catch a train anywhere and everywhere, and you can catch a high-speed, maglev, or all the other things. So we focus on all those variables. One, making it easier for people to get into the U.S. 2, when you come into the U.S., Brazil, a lot of Brazilians go to Miami. I got an email from my counterpart in Miami, that said the line to get through customs was 4 hours long. So just imagine spending $15,000 on a first-class ticket, or just having 2 kids with you or anything, and waiting in a line for 4 hours. After you've flown. Welcome to America. So we've got a lot of, as we talk about doing our jobs, and I'm the smiling face saying, come to Washington, we're more than monuments, memorials, museums. They're like looking at me, arms folded, saying, we can't even get people there. The infrastructure is not in place. The transportation system in the United States, roads, 50 years ago, we were number 1 for a long period of time, and now we're number 38 in the world in terms of transportation. So there are a lot of things and career opportunities within this industry, within everything that affects this industry, that we're having to focus on, starting with the president and organizations like U.S. Travel, Brand USA, and Travel Tourism Advisory Board.
And I think it's exciting, though, that the Secretary of Commerce is Penny Pritzker, who comes from the Hyatt family.
She is the
Hyatt family, which I think is really exciting, because that oversees a lot of these challenges we're talking about, and she is very hot on making sure that we've got Homeland Security working. I think visas are improving. But to your point, yes, you get your visa in 2 to 4 weeks now. But once you get here, you're going to spend 2 to 4 hours in line in a very non-inviting environment. So I think that there's opportunity definitely, and with Brand USA and some of the other things that are out there, and her taking over. But
you're absolutely right. The beauty of this industry and working with, there's a board called Travel Tourism Advisory Board. There's 32 people appointed. I'm one of the folks that represent our interest here in Washington, and we meet with the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of State, Secretary of Interior, Transportation, and Homeland Security. And we basically say to them, we have various committees, and you know how we all love committees, but this is a committee that really gets things done. And we talk, they have to report to us on how the visa process is changing, and we tell them certain things in which we need them to focus on, like just with customs, we need more customs agents. So the federal government can't lobby, but we can say to our industry through U.S. Travel and others that we need 1,100 additional customs agents because this is what this department told us. Department of Interior is responsible for all the national parks. D.C. is filled with national parks. The National Mall has been an embarrassment for a long time in terms of things that infrastructure changes and things that needed to happen. So they're responsible for, they have to listen to us, and then they have to make these changes, because then the next step is they have to report to the president on the progress. So it's great to be able to be a part of that and be able to say firsthand that now that we got the customs agents, we need them to go through hospitality training. Do they have to be so mean? Do they have to yell at, because that's just not inviting. And, at first there was a lot of pushback because, well, security is number one. Never said security wasn't number one, but, can you also make sure that they understand that this is economic development, and welcoming folks into our country means they're going to go back and say, I had such a phenomenal time. They're the best ambassadors when they come here. So it's an important part of the messaging in terms of being able to interface with Penny Pritzker, who our last meeting was at IPW in Chicago, and she wasn't able to come, but she will be at the next meeting with all the other secretaries listening to us and focusing on our industry.
She came to our board meeting, though.
She did come to our board meeting, yeah.
I think we're getting about time where we need to wrap up, but there's one thing that I do want to address with our panelists here, and obviously all of these issues, it takes great minds to be able to do that, and innovators to be able to do that. So let's talk about education briefly for a moment, and I pose this question to you. Since the hospitality industry has changed so rapidly today, in the past this industry was, you could say it was quite misunderstood, and a lot of people entered it with different backgrounds, or they climbed the ladder to ascend where they are today. It's a very different climate these days, and it will probably be that way for some time now. So what value then do you find in employees coming with an advanced education in hospitality, for example? How would a master's degree play a role in hiring that individual, and how do you expect them to contribute to the changing state of the industry?
So I'll jump in here. I think that what a master's program does, it brings a little bit more of the mental discipline of thinking through some of the big problems and then helping to apply real life stuff to solve them. We at U.S. Travel, we've probably hired in the last 4 years, and we're a pretty small shop. We have about 50 people, at least a half dozen folks who came with advanced degrees, many of them from hospitality and tourism, from many of the schools you saw up on the screen. But give me somebody who's got real world sensitivity, sensibility, practicality, who's done jobs in the business, and then having their minds shaped intellectually, and then combine those two, you just got a real powerhouse of a possible employee or a colleague to work with. So I really encourage you to pursue that thought. Stay engaged. To be able to work and go to school at a place like Washington, D.C. it's really an amazing benefit. There's so much opportunity. It's interesting when Gray had the slide of all the hotel companies, a few of the ownership companies. There were even many more than that, because when I was in my other career at Marriott, I spent 4 years in owner services. There's billions of dollars of capital being deployed to build projects and manage properties like Sharon's or like the Marquis or like so many hotels around. And they're looking for really smart people that have the ability to look at balance sheets, to look at operating statements, and figure out solutions to really thorny problems. So I'd really encourage you to stay in this side of the business. And by the way, this is the only business where competitors, I mean just cutthroat competitors, can't wait to talk to each other at cocktail hour. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in the pharmaceutical business or the insurance business. I guarantee you that. And in fact, you're talking about food, and my stomach's growling. So that's just how we're all made up in this business. So.
Yeah, I'd like to add that this is exciting times in the hotel industry, and as our company is recognizing the fact that the shift of what we're going to look like in the next 10 years is going to be dramatic, almost to take 50 years prior to that. And we need individuals that have different ways of looking at things, that are innovators, that are entrepreneurial. We're hiring a lot of people from other industries to come in and infuse. As a matter of fact, I was part of a meeting last week, and to get us to think differently. And we went to Gensler and went to look at, talk to them from an architectural perspective for us to think differently. We went over to Hostelling International to look at the hostel that's set up over on 11th and K Street, which is a really cool setup, very different.
Really cool.
We went to Tesla to look at, how are we innovating? How can things be different? And we need individuals that can come in and infuse a new sense. Because I was joking before, Mr. Marriott says it's heads in beds and hot food on hot plate and cold food on cold plates, right? It is much more dynamic, it's much more intense. And for those of us like myself that grew up in the industry, we sometimes get very mindset. We need individuals to come in and kind of break those paradigms and to help us see things differently so that we continue to be, the #1 hotel lodging company in the world, which is what we strive for every day. So the timing, is absolutely paramount. The talent that is out there, continuing as we move forward is going to continue to be that upside down, and we're going to need talent. And just one personal story, I attended one of these meetings 6 weeks ago, I guess, when the last panel discussion that I was here, and I ran into a young lady who was studying marketing. She was thinking about studying marketing and getting an advanced degree, and she was with a nonprofit, and I started talking to her. I connected her with someone with our corporate headquarters because I liked the way she was thinking and did things. So it's all about looking differently. We're about promoting from within, but we're also infusing talent in that organization so that we stay fresh.
Well, from my personal perspective, which I guess I bring the small business perspective, even though we now have over 1,000 employees, we're still by most definitions a small business, and in an industry that traditionally values the school of hard knocks. You have to have experience, and you can't learn what our business is about in school, was the traditional wisdom. And just really in the last 4 or 5 years, I think with some of our growth, we've afforded ourselves the chance to employ some Cornell hotel grads. We hired our first MBA last June. We now have a master's in finance as our COO, and I can only say that the talent that this group has brought has been truly transformational for our organization. It's been just invigorating for myself, for Jose. We learn when we come to work every day. We share ideas. We're organized and approaching the same problems, but from new, fresh, sophisticated perspectives. That's just been a fantastic experience for us.
Yeah. I think when all of us entered this industry by mistake or what have you, and most of us probably stumbled into the industry, none of us even knew what a school of hospitality was. And I did, and as a matter of fact, the first train of thought that comes when someone says, hey, I want you to consider a job in the hospitality industry, and nothing against either of you two, but it's, I don't want to work at a front desk in a hotel, or I don't want to work in a restaurant. And that's usually the mentality of the hospitality industry. And the beauty of where this industry is going today is, as we talked about all the various opportunities, one, it's the industry that's going to continue to grow the fastest nationwide. So just that alone tells you that it's the industry that's going to have the largest number of new jobs in any economy be it with the Marriott opening with 650 new jobs, people with no skill levels to the top end with people with master's degrees. I think what you're going to find is that whether it's specifically in this industry, if it's in the federal government, as the government is now understanding and focusing on the importance of hospitality, they're going to look for people with master's degrees and talents like yours, whether it be real estate companies, as they're understanding the fact that there are more and more, there are 4 hotels that are opening in Washington, brand new hotels that are opening this year alone, and that's not going to stop, and that's going to continue on. They're going to want to know and have people not just with real estate expertise, but with hospitality expertise on their teams to help them. You know, and every discipline that you can think of, be it accounting, be it architecture, they're all looking for people that truly understand the essence of this industry. You know, I did a tour of the Cambria Suites Hotel, which is in the O Street project on 7th and O, just a couple blocks north of the convention center. And as I was walking into the hotel, and you can imagine, we've all been in a lot of hotels, the first thing they said to me was that, you know, as you looked at the landscape or the architecture around Washington, the architecture and the design kind of continued on in the hotel, whereas they have row houses as their interior design in the hotel rooms. I mean, in the lobby and in the corridors of the hotel, and it looked incredible. And then when you go into the hotel rooms, their headboard was a subway station, and it, you know, it doesn't sound good, but trust me, it was extremely well done. And you know, they told me that the company, and very cool, very DC cool, and they told me the company that they hired, but they had someone that has a master's in hospitality that was helping to guide them in that process so that they can think a little differently. So there are just so many different opportunities and ways in which you can use a master's in this industry that didn't exist, or maybe other industries didn't think about it in the same vein as they're doing today.
If I can throw one more thing out, America, it's a land of opportunity. America, in the size and the composure and the breadth of the travel business, it's the #1 export in America. You go, what do you mean export? Well, when international travelers come in, they spend their money here and they go home. That's export. So we're the #1 export in America. This industry is top 10 in every single state, including the District of Columbia as an employer. Here it's #2. So think about that. And travel is #1, 2, and 3 in nearly every congressional district in the country. So when you talk about power and influence and opportunity, it all goes together. This is really an amazing place and to work, to go to school. It's an amazing industry to go in. So I encourage you to really jump in.
And absolutely, just to follow up a little bit on what Elliott was saying, one of the things that this program will be doing is addressing all of those different aspects of hospitality, because hospitality has changed so much. And I think that's one of the benefits to joining a new program, a small program, a differentiated program like this one, because we're not going to be just talking about hotels. We're going to be talking about airlines. We're going to be talking about trains. We're going to be talking about, you know, real estate. We're going to be talking about all these different aspects that hospitality now encompasses, so that you can go out and find jobs in all of these diverse aspects. It doesn't mean you have to work at a front desk in a hotel, which is absolutely fine as well. Just to also follow up on what Sharon was saying, I'm encouraging our students to think of this program as a 2-year job interview, because you're going to meet dynamic people just like this across the industry all the time in your exposure in this collaborative hub that we're creating here. And it's something that I want not only students to be a part of, but again, to invite each of you who are already in the hospitality industry to come play a part in that. So without saying any more, we're going to go on a little tour, walk down the reception. So please give our great panelists a round of applause.